Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Hey everybody, my name's Tom Kepner and I'm an alcoholic. Man, is this been a good convention or what? We need to give a big round of applause to the convention committee. They've worked real hard, the food's been great, and the setup's wonderful, isn't it? As I said, my name's Tom Kepner and I'm an alcoholic. And as I understand it, I got a basic purpose, and that's to come here and talk about what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. But before we do that, you know, I'm surprised you guys invite me back here. I have spoke here so much, I figured you guys would be tired of my act, you know, and I say that because, you know, it just doesn't seem possible, the privilege that Alcoholics Anonymous has provided me and other men that I've known in the program. But, you know, I'm here today on crutches. That's a little bit different, you know, and I'd like to be able to tell you my wife shot me, or I'd like to be able to tell you that I was surfing and caught too big a wave, went into the reef. But the fact of the matter is, I think the second half of the first step struck. And the second step I took after that unmanageability ended up with me on the ground, and my leg turned around kind of funny. And so it reminded me of the last time I was on crutches, because when I saw the doctor, he goes, well, we're going to have to put you in a cast, we're going to have to operate, and you're going to be on crutches. I said, Doc, it's no big deal. I was on crutches for 11 months, you know, and so what I failed to realize and what I failed to tell him was that was 37 years ago and about 125 pounds less. And crutches are made differently today. You know, they don't respond like those ones. But the last time I was on crutches was I was standing before a judge in San Diego, California. And he was suggesting that I attend my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that was directly tied to a motor vehicle accident where alcohol seemed to have been involved in some way, and an ominous warning that I failed to heed. But you know, really by that time it was almost too late for me. You know, those of you that got to hear Toby's talk last night, you know, I know that you got to hear about that peace and ease and relief, that sigh of relief that comes at once by taking even a few drinks, as described in our doctor's opinion. Now, those of you that know me know that I usually storm around and wave my arms. When I was still drinking, people thought I was flagging the cops down and stuff, you know, because I was big progesterone, you know, and so I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that tonight, but I probably will. So if I fall down, don't try this at home. I'm a professional, you know. Long story short, though, that judge sent me to a clubhouse in. I went to an Alano club in Lemon Grove, California, and I remember I walked into my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know how some people say that the first time you walk into a meeting, you felt like you were at home? I didn't. You know, I walked in there was a guy that was smoking out of a hole in his neck, you know, had the little patch up here, and he was smoking and going, ain't great to me, and I was going, my God, you know. And there's another man that had been run over by it. He passed out drunk on the railroad track, and a train had run over his leg and cut it off, and he literally had a peg leg with naked women carved on it and stuff. I was going, this is amazing, you know, and I felt so much better about myself after I walked into that meeting. And you know, for those of you that are new, Alcoholics Anonymous is a real trip. So buckle your seatbelt, you know, because, you know, it's kind of like a cross between a charismatic church and an Amway meeting. You know, I mean, is that you don't know whether there's a multi-level marketing scheme and someone's going to try to sell you a whole garage full of stuff that you can sell and make a fortune for yourself, you know, because, you know, we come on kind of strong sometimes. And I remember in my first meeting, I came in and I found this real big fat guy to sit behind so they couldn't see me, you know. Now I am him. You know, and so I go to my home group. It's a Northeast group in Jackson, Mississippi. We meet every night of the week. We get so excited about it, we meet 3 times on some days. So if you're ever in Jackson and you're looking for a meeting, we'd love to have you at the Northeast group. We're at the Yana Club, 555 Hartfield Street. We're upstairs, and we'd love to have you come by. And it's a clubhouse meeting, and there's whirling and twirling. You know, there's young sobriety, and it's if you want to work with a newcomer, come on down. You know, because we got a ton of them. And but anyway, so now if I need to find a newcomer, I usually just glance behind me because there's usually one hiding behind me, so the chair doesn't call on them. You know, so I stood in that meeting. They told me I was the most important person in the room that night, and I didn't feel like it. And then they told me to shut up, you know, and what I had to give away they didn't want, you know, and so I was a little concerned that they didn't know my full worth and value. So that was my exposure to Alcoholics Anonymous in May of 1970, and my sobriety date is September 2nd of 1984. So you can tell that I'm one of those folks that bounced in and out, and I used your fellowship for everything other than what it was intended to be. And that's why I say that Alcoholics Anonymous is such a privilege, because those same men that I made fun of, I begged 10 years later to have them let me back into that room. You know, I'm the kind of alcoholic that loves to pick up one-day chips, get the hug, smell the perfume, you know, and the thing is, I remember I was in Ocean Beach, California, and I stood up for another one-day chip, and they said, "We're out. Can you turn some of yours in?" You know, and you know, and that's the thing. But the point I wanted to make is that until, you know, the theme for this conference is action and more action. And until I became involved in action in Alcoholics Anonymous, I didn't have a chair. I didn't fit in. And I didn't feel like I belonged. It wasn't until I became involved in putting out chairs, you know. And when I started, we didn't have styrofoam cups, and we still had ashtrays, and so, you know, you got to wash out cups with cigarette butts in them, and, you know, I mean, it was great fun, but I felt like I belonged when I was doing that stuff. I don't have an amazing story, you know. I wished I had read. When I first bought a big book, I didn't have an idea what it was, but I bought it to use for cover so cops wouldn't, you know, search my car and stuff. I threw it up on the dash, you know, and if you're new, that program doesn't work. Now, during my talk, you're going to hear a lot of programs that don't work. You know, that's one of my main claims to fame is someone goes, "Well, you know, I'm drinking O'Doul's," and I go, "Yeah, I worked that one. You're going to love how that turns out," you know, and, "Oh, you know, I'm dating my sponsor," and I go, "Oh, can we get video?" You know, I mean, we can use it as a PSA for Alcoholics Anonymous. Anyway, but the thing is that I've always thought my case was different. And until I had the same problem as the rest of you people, I didn't find a way out. You know, I heard that in Donna's story this morning. And if you didn't get a chance to be here, a powerful message of recovery. And make sure you get one of her, a recording of her talk, because she had a real message and really carried it. And I really want to thank you for that. But the thing is that I didn't have an amazing story. I was basically a screw up. Please see my leg. Is that I grew up in a military family. We moved around the country a lot. And then they settled down and became educators. We settled down on the west coast of the United States, and we lived in a combination of San Diego, San Francisco, Oregon, up and down that coast. And you know, I have two other sisters, perfect, one older and one younger, but they don't suffer from the disease of alcoholism like I do. In my family, I didn't see my dad drink. I didn't see my mom would occasionally order a drink. And what I didn't know is that my father's father had been a raging alcoholic and died drunk. And he swore he would never drink. And the thing was, I lived with a dry drunk, you know, and he needed a drink bad, you know, and because, you know, for me, alcohol was a solution. It wasn't really my problem until much later. It's a problem for everybody else, but for me, it was a solution. So we moved around a lot, and like I said, in the military sense, and then you know, I grew up in schools. I'd like to be able to tell you that I came from poor socioeconomic conditions, and I was treated poorly, and I wasn't. You know, I mean, is that both my parents were hardworking. We never wanted for anything. We weren't real well-to-do, and very early on, I had this feeling like I heard Toby talking about last night of not really fitting in and being unsure and just being uncomfortable about what was going on. And you know, I was confused about this alcoholism and drug addiction thing. You know, is that when I went to my first meeting in Lemon Grove, I thought I was a drug pioneer. You know, I thought I was blazing trails so other people could follow me. But the fact of the matter is that I didn't relate with the singleness of purpose that was being talked about at the meeting, because I had a peculiar sense of what my problem was. The way I saw it, when I drank, I got misdemeanors. When I used drugs, I got felonies. And so, you know, the thing is that I had a sliding scale, you know, and the thing is that my family was, you know, at first they were okay with me smoking pot because it got me off of glue. So they were, you know, they're a little happy about that. But, you know, they were more comfortable if I was at family functions if I was drinking. And I don't know if you're an alcoholic like me, for the first few Christmases and Thanksgivings, they're kind of okay with you drinking on them legal holidays. But as you progress, you can, you know, as Donna said, the looks start getting shot at you the minute you start going over near the bar. But like I said, I grew up in a pretty normal household. I had two perfect sisters. And we did real well in school, but you know, I always felt like I fell short. Things didn't quite fit in. Everybody worked real hard at trying to make me okay. And you know, in the midst of all this, I discovered liquor, and it wasn't until many inventories. You know, I mean, my sponsor was big on inventory, and one of the things that he maintained is that an inventory is God's gift to the alcoholic. You know, that it allows me to clear away the wreckage and let me find out what's going on. And you know, the start of chapter 4, I wished I had read it when I first came to Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, in the start of We Agnostics, it says, you know, if it says something like, if, when you drink, you have little control of how much you take, or when you want to quit entirely, you are unable to, you may be suffering from an illness that only a spiritual experience can help or conquer. And the thing is that's my description of the phenomenon of craving. That's my definition of my alcoholism. And you know, even though I did all kinds of pills and potions and lotions and variety of different concoctions, at the base of all of it was alcohol. Is that I didn't see that the common thread through the whole thing was alcohol. I thought that was a disease of old people. I didn't realize that underneath everything that was going on with me was something called the phenomenon of craving. That once I took a drink, I couldn't accurately predict how much I was going to use or what my behavior was going to be. You know, and the thing is that I thought that I had very unpredictable behavior with real significant consequences tied to it. But if you step back and look at it, it couldn't have gone any other way. I mean, people could almost predict it. See, I'm the young man that has a lot of potential. Any of you guys have potential? You know, I mean, that used to chap my rear end, something fierce. Everyone says, but you have so much potential. You know, it wasn't until after a lot of inventory that I figured out what a lot of potential means. I don't finish stuff. I look good out of the gate and I fade in the turn. You know, is that everybody has great hopes and dreams, and then they look around and they go, where's that Kepner kid? Where's that Kepner kid? You know, I talked to people about all the different jobs I've had, careers actually, you know, because I was always in between careers, you know. But the thing is, I'm Mr. Orientation. I'm 3 days on the job and I need a break, you know, and the thing is I didn't finish stuff, and that quitting it and blaming others for what was going on, sitting there drinking was a problem. I was talking to David earlier today, and he said, when we were at area assembly, you were telling us a story and got interrupted. And I go, well, what was going on? He said, well, you said it was a Sunday and you guys were sitting around drinking. And I was going, that's all I said? And he said, yeah. And I go, well, that could be one of 100 stories, you know, because that's how all my stories started out. Now, as I went through school, I had difficulty with attendance. I never really finished school, and my father, being with the school district, was able to get me in the alternative school, where in those days that's where the pregnant young ladies went, you know, because they didn't, you know, you didn't want them seeing them in the hall because it might be catching or something, you know. And so I went to the alternative school and couldn't show up there. Is that I don't show up places. And one of the things that my family was always concerned with is I'd go out to get a pack of smokes and I'd just disappear because I'd never know what was going to happen, because I'd drink a couple beers, have a shot of whiskey, and the next thing you know, I'd be gone, and people wouldn't know when I was coming back. As my alcohol is my drinking career. Don't you love that? By the way, if you're new, that's the only place you're going to hear it referred to as a career, you know, is in here. So, you know, you'll hear a lot about our magnificent ability to manipulate. You'll pretty much only hear that in here too. You know, we're real taken with ourselves, but it's not like we're Bobby Fischer chess champions planning this stuff out 26 moves in advance. Most of the stuff's coming at us point blank, and I've had to live with some really lame lies, you know, and just go down swinging with them. But I didn't finish high school, and I was going to work in a mill, and you know, right about that time there was a thing called the Vietnam conflict going on, and they had a thing called the lottery, you know, and where they pulled your birthday out of a hat, and it got to tell you whether you were going to at the request of your neighbors, go join the armed services. And on my day was pulled. It's the only time I ever won anything gambling. I was lucky number 17, and so I went away to at the request of the president to go try to defend the country. And this is my first look at what. I always try to get an example of what the phenomenon of craving is so I can explain it to a newcomer, and hopefully the magic of Alcoholics Anonymous happens where we can relate. Is that I went to basic training, and by the way, if you have really long hair when you go to basic training, when they cut it off, don't put it in a bag and take it with you. Just a little tip in case, you know, that does not turn out to be a pleasant decision in your. Now, I'm poor with decisions, but I was at Fort Ord, California, and after about 4.5, 5 weeks of training, I decided that me and two other guys decided. I was kind of open-minded. I didn't come up with a plan. I just came along with. That's why I was so successful in Alcoholics Anonymous. But you know. We left the base, went into Monterey, California. We're going to have a couple of drinks, sneak back in, and tell everyone how cool we were. And they came back. I blacked out, And 2 days later, I was arrested. And I was arrested by MPs. And they're different than regular police, by the way. They consider you government property, and that I had damaged government property. And so, and I didn't really understand all this, but once again, my father had been involved in the Army a long while, and so rather than and at that point in time, the Army was kind of concerned about how people's behavior was going on, and they were going to make some examples out of a few folks. So I was selected as one of those examples, and my father intervened for me. Now, my father and I were never really able to sit in the same room for more than about 10 minutes without a fight breaking out. And it wasn't that we hated it, we just couldn't get along. And we tried all these different things to try to do it. But there was the first thing with the phenomenon of craving. I had no intention of going to jail, staying out, anything else. I took a drink. And then I decided a few more. They decided to go back. I decided to stay. And as I said, my behavior became unmanageable. I popped up on a radar, and the police had me. And that's kind of been an ongoing story for me. So the next thing that happened is that I was dishonorably discharged from the service. And so I didn't have to go to the penitentiary or Leavenworth, but I did have to leave the service with a dishonorable discharge, and that was fine with me. And my alcoholism continued to progress, and my liver went into distress, and I continued to pick up drunk drivings. And by the time that I came to the end of my drinking, I had accumulated 9 drunk drivings, and I was a menace. You know, I went through several programs put on by the the state of California, USB 38 and stuff like that, to try to take care of my drinking. And the thing is, all kinds of powers greater than myself tried to help me with my drinking. The school tried to help me, my family tried to help me, police tried to help me, the Army tried to help me. All these powers greater than myself, and they were always, it always ended up a failure. And a lot of times, I've been in a lot of treatment centers. And I was in treatment centers when it used to be, Toby, prior to Haldol, they had something called Thorazine. And, it had a little bit other side effects to it, and there's nothing like going to group with pillows tied on your feet and your hands out like this and your tongue sticking out of your mouth, and you're going, how are you feeling today, great to be sober, and the thing was, they'd dry you out and let you out, and until you, and that was treatment. I've been in a lot of treatment, and I've had the goodbye story at a lot of treatment centers. I've learned so much in the time I've been here. I've never shared this with anyone else before. We are happy, joyous, and free. We're going to trudge that road of happy destiny, and I truly meant to go to meetings. I truly meant to go to the halfway house. I truly meant to get a job. But you know what? When I left the treatment center, it was like radar went off. And I said, my tolerance is down, and I'm going to feel it like I used to feel it. Because, the thing is that, my sister is not an alcoholic. She takes a couple of drinks. She says, I'm starting to feel it. I better quit. I've got to work tomorrow. When I take 2 drinks is when I come alive. And I'm that person that I always wanted to be but never was. Now the thing is, for you thespians, I can't hit my mark and stay there. I slide right by my mark because I continue to drink and add other stuff with it. And the thing is, I can't predict what's going to happen to me. And my alcoholism became very unpredictable for me, is that I went through I know we go through different emotional states, and it had a different effect on me. First I started out kind of like a happy drunk, and then a loving drunk, and then a traveling drunk, and then a mean drunk. And the thing is by the time I got mean, I was too drunk to protect myself. And so, I was historically, let's take it outside, you know, and then as I'm picking myself up out of the street, you know, and thoroughly having my clock cleaned, you know, oh, let's go back in, you know, and you know, go back in and go drinking. And so the thing was is that I didn't see how this was going to end. And the thing is that even when I really meant it, I was unable to stay sober. You know, and the thing is that I checked into a couple of treatment centers, and I said, you know what's different this time? I really want it for myself. And the thing is I did. You know, people were going, how can you live like that? You know, I love living in the dumpster. You know, I mean, is that it's got 2 skylights. There's just nothing like it. Oh, and listen, if you ever have to live in a dumpster, let me just give you a tip. Always look for one behind a clothing store, a carpet store, something like that. Dry garbage, and I don't know if I should let out the real secret, shoe stores. That fine Corinthian leather. It's remarkable. So, you know, if you do have to live in a dumpster, I'll give you that one. You know, but make sure you know when they pick up. You know, that's the downside of that. I had a friend that was injured real bad because he didn't wake up when they picked up. But the thing is that this seemed to go on forever. You know, I'm reminded of the story in the big book about the guy with the carpet slippers, where, you know, out come the carpet slippers. He starts drinking. You know, he goes through the jitters to hospitalizations to being dead within 4 years. And you know, and my sponsor had me read that story, and he said, well, what's the moral of that story? And I said, well, you can't take a drink no matter how long you wait. And he goes, well, that's true, but it won't kill you quick. You know, the thing is that my alcoholism took its time, and my alcoholism so far has not killed me, it has tortured me and taken away everything that I care about. So I'm in this revolving door of 3-day jobs, bouncing in and out, and you know, I didn't know what alcohol was going to do to me when I took my first drink. I didn't know the trip I was going to go on, and I didn't know my last drink was my last drink. You know, there's this thing about powerlessness is that when I went to my last treatment center, and I went through the treatment center process when I sobered up. When I went to my last treatment center, my family thought they were putting me in a hospice. You know, that basically they were going to kind of rest me up so it wouldn't be so ugly when I passed away, because my pancreas was in trouble, my liver was in trouble, my kidneys weren't real crazy about it. I was, you know, trying to cough up a lung most of the time, and you know, I had various broken bones and stuff like that because I was a screw up. You know, is that I never did anything without being unmanageable and drunken in the middle of it, and no wonder I was getting hurt. And the thing is that I had a few relationships, but they really hadn't gone well. This one time I got into a relationship with an attorney. I thought that would be good, and I destroyed her life, and I destroyed the life of her family. And I'm one of those folks that I can say that, you know, that she left me because I stole from her. She left me because I lied to her. She left me because I stole from her mother. She left me because she didn't like living with a drunken pig. You know, the thing that we don't always realize is that when I vomit in bed and I expect someone else to clean it up, it's not pretty for them. When I become incontinent, you know, and the thing is that I'm the kind of alcoholic that drinks a quart, passes out on your couch, and becomes incontinent on your couch. And so it was very common for me to pass out at somebody's house and wake up in the front yard, because they knew what was going to happen, and the minute I went out, they threw me outside, you know. So, you know, they're going to save their furniture, save their carpet, you know, and so the thing is that they talked about me having antisocial behavior, you know, and I said, oh, you mean I don't like to be around people? And they said, well, no, people don't particularly care to be around you, you know, and it wasn't really that. I always thought it was because I was a loner, and they go, you know, that's not really it, you know, I mean, you know, If you take a look in the mirror, have you gotten downwind to you a little bit? You know, I mean, it ain't sweet. That Corinthian leather ain't coming through, bro. You know, and so anyway, this seemed to be kind of an endless cycle, and family members took turn picking me up and trying to salvage me and stuff like that. And so the end came when I was living in Encinitas, California, and I was living with a young lady, and she'd gone to Santa Barbara to visit her mother. I couldn't go there because I had stolen all her mother's cancer drugs, and I broke back into the house because I was once again kicked out, because I was always being kicked out of the house. And I thought it was my house because I had actually found it in the paper. I hadn't paid for it, but I had actually found it in the paper. So first come, first served, dibs, I got it, you know. So I snuck back in because, see, inventory has told me how much self-centered fear I have and how much it's cost me. But anyway, I snuck back in, and the only thing that would have anything to do with me was my dog, Rusty. He was a golden retriever, and he needed Allapup. I mean, he had a horrible life, you know. I mean, see, I'm an unpredictable alcoholic. Sometimes, like I said, I go through those stages. I was a blackout drinker. I never knew when time travel was going to take over. And my drinking was unpredictable. Like I told you, my sister would take 2 drinks and start to feel it. Sometimes I'd drink 3 drinks and I'd black out and I wouldn't know what happened. Sometimes I'd drink 20 drinks and think someone had been watering my booze, because it seemed to have no effect on me. So I could never predict what was going to happen when I started drinking. Now, so I'm laying on the floor of this house, and something tore inside me, and I started bleeding real profusely. And I don't know if you've ever torn anything in the esophageal area, but you bleed real quick when it happens. And so I laid on the floor for a couple of days there until she came back. And Rusty, the dog, looked like he was getting interested in eating me because he hadn't eaten in a few days, and I wasn't moving very much. And I figured I'd make the papers, you know, but the thing was she came home and she saw me laying on the floor in a pool of blood, and she said, "What are you doing here, you SOB?" And I said, "I'm dying, baby." You know, I mean, I'm going for the baby. You know, I mean, I'm dying, baby. And her response was, "Good. You know, and do it somewhere else." And so, you know, I'm going, "But you don't understand, I'm going in again." You know, I mean, I'm, you know, talk about master manipulator, how weak. I'm going, "But baby, really?" You know, and she was going to Al-Anon by then, and so she called my family. They didn't want to come and get me, so she called me a cab. And they loaded me up in a cab, and I ended up going to I was going to turn myself into county mental health and do the 2-year Thorazine treatment and just kind of park it for a while, you know, because I didn't think I could sober up. But I just couldn't take the pace anymore. And the booze and stuff had quit working a long time ago. And when you can't live sober and you can't live using, you're just biding time before you take your life. I mean, there's just really nothing to, I mean, it's nothing's working. And you know what? I had sat in AA meetings, and I had heard people say the 3rd step prayer, and I had seen people get down on their knees and say it, and say they felt a conscious contact with a power greater than themselves. And when I prayed, I didn't feel anything. I didn't feel anything. And you know, I look back at the 10 Commandments. I hadn't done well with them. You know, when I went down the list, I'm going, uh-oh. I wonder if we can change the wording here. You know what I mean? Is that I had not done well with that, and I had been really avoidant of any kind of relationship with God. And I got to the point where I thought God was for children. It was a child story. And I even went out. I grew up in California. I can't help it. I said, if there really was a God, the rich people would own it, and they wouldn't let us have any of it. You know what I mean? And I just said, this is baloney. And I got into an AA meeting, and they start praying, and I'm going, this isn't going to work for me. You know, I've got real problems. And I had gone to psychiatrists. And another example that I use for the phenomenon of craving is that I had a psychiatrist that told me I had family of origin issues, you know, and okay, you know, and you're not an alcoholic. And I go, oh, okay. And he goes, I want you to go to a bar. I want you to have 2 drinks in 2 hours. I want you to give me a call. 2 drinks, 2 hours, give him a call. And he says, what do you think? And I go, you're right. It's family issues. And he says, come see me tomorrow morning at 9. I didn't make the appointment because I was in jail. You know, I had gone back into the bar to celebrate alcohol not being my problem and gotten a drunk driving later that night, which was the reason I had been referred to him in the first place. You know, and so I didn't think this stuff was going to work. I really didn't. And I remember that first meeting I went to. Those guys needed help. But it wasn't going to work for me. And so the thing was I've always kind of kept myself on the outside looking in, doing that alcoholic theme song of what you say is true, but you don't understand. My case is a little bit different. Let me explain it to you. And the thing is that I got into this last treatment center, and I used in the last treatment center, and I drank. And I went to AA meetings, and I slipped out the back door, and I bought pints of vodka, and I snuck them back into the treatment center, and I drank them, and I thought I was doing good because I only got drunk 3 times in a month, you know. And I mean, I'm going, hey, progress, you know. And the thing is they sent me out here to Mississippi to go to another treatment center. I'd never even spelled Mississippi correctly prior to this, you know. I mean, I got the crooked letter, you know what I mean. And so I said, that's great, because you know what, when you have a lot of potential, you don't finish stuff, and you have to reinvent your life about every 6 months. Because what you're doing isn't working, something tremendous happens, and you start over. You quit easy. And so I came out here, and you know, out here, I met some people, and I got into some AA, and it was real simple AA. And I started dropping some of the drug pioneer stuff, and I started, you know, going to meetings, going through the motions, even though I didn't feel it. And see, I stayed a coward for 2 years as far as spirituality goes. I wouldn't have a concept of God. You know, people told me, what's your concept of God? And I go, well, if I can conceive it, it's too small for there to be a God. I was scared. I wasn't going to take a stand. And you know, if you're an alcoholic and you're in this program and you're really not working the steps, and you're just going to meetings, and you're mumbling the Lord's Prayer, kind of like you're saying the Pledge of Allegiance or something, you know, just initially not throwing up on yourself, not wetting your pants, not lighting yourself on fire is a big improvement. You know, I mean, but the new wears off of that. The new wears off of that, and inside, I started giving anything to be able to have a drink. And the grace period wears off. You know, I had gone home to San Diego, and my father had a stroke when I got there. And I got to thinking, this is your chance. No one will blame you. Even though the man and I couldn't sit in the same room for more than 10 minutes without there being a fight. So I went to the emergency room, and we went into intensive care, and I sat there, and for some reason, I don't know why it is, I called Alcoholics Anonymous. 5 men came over to see me. I've never seen them before. I've never seen them again. It was 2 sponsors and a couple of their pigeons. And they sat down with me, and they said, Tom, go do a 9th step with your dad. I said, he's in a coma. And they said, go do a 9th step with your dad. And they ended up talking me into doing that. Because one of the things that I had regretted the most is that he'd never really seen me sober. You know, he'd never seen the benefit of what Alcoholics Anonymous had done for me. He considered himself a failure as a father. And I went in, and I was able to do a 9th step while he was in a coma, and he passed away. But, you know, the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous happened that day. And I came back to Mississippi, And I still wasn't doing what I should have been doing. I had gone through a 4-step, but it was basically bad behavior. It wasn't really down to causes and conditions. And I was sponsoring some folks, and I was spreading the disease, and because I really didn't have a recovery program to give away, but I was still trying to take these guys through the steps and show them what was going on. And it was about me. It wasn't about carrying the message or being a channel by which the miracle could happen. And the desire to use came back strongly. And I was just at around 2 years sober, and I was so dry. I was ready to burn. And you know, I had bought a bottle, and I had a gun, and I called my sponsor, and I said, you know, I'm either going to put the bottle in my mouth or I'm going to put this pistol in my mouth. And he said, drink, you know, and you know, I said, what, you know, and he goes, drink, you know, he goes, and I said, what do you mean? He goes, or you can come on over here. And it was at that point in time that that moment of clarity came through, that as my 3rd step would have it, if God wanted me drinking, he'd have made me successful at it, and I wasn't. You know, and then we went through an inventory of my grosser handicaps, because the book says unless you launch into a vigorous course of action, there'll be little permanent result of that decision I made at his house. And see, I'd always kind of come up to it and dropped away instead of going through it. My first 4-step was not to develop a relationship with my higher power. It was to get out of treatment. My second 4-step was not to develop a relationship and know the things that have been causing me to stumble and have a relationship with God. It was to get my sponsor off my back. You know, and the third one was because I was suicidal, and I got to develop a concept. And so in my concept, the thing that I could, you know, that I've never been able to talk to people about this for when I was in those first 2 or 3 years, you know, as I looked at my concept, just like it talks about just after that when they're in the director and the actor and stuff like that, is I had a parent and a child. Because I remember that every time I got in a jackpot, my folks said, why didn't you come and tell us? And so now I try to discuss things with this concept. And the other thing that I could never really get into the formalized religion, and I don't know why, but in chapter 4 it talks about we find our higher power deep inside each and every one of us. And the great reality is that I would look at somebody and I'd make eye contact with them, and I could feel their spirit. And I could feel their spirit in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I remember when I was with people and we were real intoxicated, you couldn't make that eye contact. You couldn't, you know, make that. I remember sitting in cheap flop house hotel rooms and not being able to deal with barely smoking cigarettes, and then your lighter goes out, and you have to go out and deal with people about how unmanageable and how useless my life was, where I was hiding. And so in this coming to grips with the spirituality of this program is that it's the connection between each and every one of us. It was explained to me by my sponsor that it was my defects of character that were blocking me from you, that were preventing me from making that contact with you. So at the end of this 5th step, I was able to tell you exactly the 5 defects of character that most stood in my way of my usefulness to God and to those around me. And so I had something specific to pray for in my 7-step prayer in the morning, because prior to this, I only had generic prayers. I didn't have a conception. I had no relationship. See, I didn't know that you formed a relationship with God the same way you form a relationship with your sponsor. And you know, I mean, not that my sponsor was God, but initially I needed a cop at my elbow. I used to say that I couldn't control my behavior, but if there's a policeman standing there next to me, I was able to control my behavior, you know, until he left. And the thing is that I smarted off to the police one time. You know, and they soon taught me a lesson about fighting fair and all that kind of good stuff. But long story short is that then I went through the 6th and 7th prayer directly after my 5th step, because I was real willing to have that stuff removed right at the end of that. But if you give me some wiggle room and let me sit back on my rear end, rest on my laurels, my past accomplishments, if you will, man, I start becoming less and less willing. You know, my sponsor told me is that my level of desperation is directly proportional to my level of willingness. And that unfortunately, for there to be spiritual growth, I had to be hurting, or all I had was a good intention, and I'd never make a decision. Now, in the 8th step, we made 3 lists. And in those 3 lists, I list willing, maybe, and never. And we went through each one of those. And when I got through with the willings, the maybes became willings, and the nevers became maybes. And in about 4 years, I was able to pretty much go through that. Now, Alcoholics Anonymous has allowed me to remain in the same career and basically the same job for about 22 years now. And when I first went to a treatment, I work in a treatment center, but when I first went to a treatment center, this one, if you sat next to me, they gave you a drug screen. You know, I mean, it was it was just guilt by association, you know, and they, you know, and I was such a willing young patient. You know, they said, go find a 4-leaf clover. You're going to need luck to stay sober, you know, and so I made one. You know, I took an extra leaf, glued it on, brought it back in. You know, I mean, is that because see, I was still that guy that thought that was going to work that 2-step program of recovery. I'm powerless over alcohol, and I'm here to carry the message. If it'll always bring relief, why do all that other stuff? But what I didn't realize is this lesson my sponsor was teaching me with the steps is, if you don't do the step, you can't teach it to somebody else. And if you can't teach it to somebody else, the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous can't happen. And when that man passed away, he said, can I trust Alcoholics Anonymous to you? And you know, that's an important thing. The reason I stand before you in a coat and tie today is because he says that's what I'm supposed to do. The reason I don't swear from the podium is he says that's what I'm supposed to do. If I run into you and you shake my hand, I go, it's always a pleasure. That's what he taught me to say. I wish he taught me to say more, because other people beat me to the punch now. You know, if they ask me, how are you doing? I go, just right. You know, but the thing is, you know, he taught me how to live, because I was unable to figure that out, and we passed that on to our pigeons. And I've always been a proud pigeon, and I have pigeons. And people have made pigeon a derogatory term, but you know, Dr. Bob brought it up, and he talked about that we'd come in and we would be new and we'd be blinking, and we'd go, we got a new man, new pigeon, let's put him under our wing, boys. You know, and so the thing is that it's really a term of endearment. And, you know, I think that sometimes we get away from that in Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, recently I've been in meetings and I've heard people say, keep coming back, as a put down to people when they say something that's maybe a little off kilter or off color. And, you know, that isn't the Alcoholics Anonymous I was taught about. Alcoholics Anonymous I was taught about is just find the most uncomfortable looking person in the room and go make them comfortable. Go shake their hand. Go see what they're doing. These were simple things my sponsor had me do, you know, and I didn't see the point of them at that time, because he gave me 12 things to do. You know, I was supposed to get a job, go to it every day, pay my bills, cut my hair, take a shower. You know, I mean, he had these things. Bring your book to every meeting. If you don't have your book, he'd send you home. You know, I mean, it's all this crazy stuff, you know. And I'd say, well, why do I have to do this? And he goes, go get drunk and find out why. And I'm going, geez, this guy's Mr. Extreme, you know. And but nonetheless, you know, in the 9th step, I thought the 9th step was so that I could make right all the people that I had harmed. Well, that was just a small part of it. It allowed me to answer the phone. Because, see, I got sober before there was caller ID, you know. You couldn't be screening your calls. There were no answering machines, you know. The phone's ringing, you're going, money, trouble, you know. You didn't know. And somebody go, is this Thomas Carl Kepner? Oh, no, he died fighting communism. He's a true hero. You know, I mean, is that certified letters used to drive me up the wall. I go to the post office and like touch them with a pen so I wouldn't even get my fingerprints on them to see what they were, you know. And the thing is that I don't have to dodge people anymore. And the other thing is that today, there's not a whole lot of secrets in my life. I mean, I don't wait for the other shoe to drop like I used to, because I used to think that in early sobriety, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen? Something bad's going to happen. It can't stay good. Go through all that kind of stuff and just tear myself up. So time rocked on, and on that list of 12 things, I was supposed to carry a little notebook with me, write my 10th step every day, call him on the phone, don't call on time, he won't talk to you. You know, all that simple stuff, which was discipline, which I didn't have. I thought my sponsor was supposed to be on 24-hour call, you know, and that if I had a little problem, that like an alarm would go off in his house and a red light would flash and he'd slide down a fire pole, you know, and it'd be sponsor man, you know, and if I called him during the news, he'd go, "What time this become a problem for you, sport?" I hated that when he said that. And I'd say, "About 3 o'clock today, sir." And he goes, "You got a gun?" I go, "No." And you got a bottle? I go, "Nope." And he go, "Click." You know, and see, it takes some time for people to get us civilized. If I went to him with a problem and I didn't have a written inventory and didn't have a written pros and cons list, he'd say, "Well, it isn't important then. Don't worry about it." Because he expected me to do some work on the problem before I took it to him. And so, you know, these things were gifts that were given to me that I didn't realize the importance of them until much later. Now, the 11th step is that I didn't see in there that it was about what God's will for me to do was. It wasn't for things to come out right for me or anything else. It was what I was supposed to be doing. And how I find that out is that whether it's during the sexual inventory of my 4th step is to pray and meditate about what the next right thing to do is. And I can feel it. There's a spiritual current, and I can tell when I'm with the current and when I'm kind of going against the current. And, you know, the wisdom to know the difference is the gift that I think most of us are struggling for most of the time. Because, you know, a lot of my stuff has claw marks on it and, you know, and things. And I have to come to a point where this isn't supposed to happen. But, you know, it talks about in the family afterwards in the 130s where it talks about when misfortune comes, we cheerfully capitalize on it. You know, when misfortune comes, I would normally say, why me? After all the good stuff I've done, I deserve to be graded on a special curve. I didn't take a drink today. What else do you want me to quit? I came to you folks and begged you to help me, and 3 days later thought you owed me something because I hadn't taken a drink today. And you know, the thing is that when I'm looking at 11th step, is I need to be asking the question, what am I supposed to learn? What am I supposed to do? What's the next right thing? And discuss that. Because, you know, the thing is that if I talk with other people about that, it becomes obvious. When it's up here in my head, it's really bizarre, you know, and I'll say it out loud and it'll just kind of hang out there in the air, you know, and so the thing is just discussing it with another member of Alcoholics Anonymous or my sponsor or someone else will oftentimes make that come clear. Now, that 12th step. Carrying the message. Well, you know, Dr. Bob boiled this thing down to love and service. You know, I have a beautiful wife, and I'm married in Alcoholics Anonymous, and she's sitting over there, and she's one of those service people, you know, and she kind of got me dragged into formal service. But my view of service had always been real small. It had kind of been in my home group, you know, washing the cups, hearing 5th step, stuff like that. And she got me kind of involved in the formal service structure of Alcoholics Anonymous. And in doing so, there's all kinds of folks in this room. We got the delegate, the alternate delegate, past delegate, got all kinds of folks in this room, all past delegate. that committee chairs in this room, I have met people that were serious about sobriety and willing to put it in action is sitting around in these rooms. And service isn't for everybody. You know, I mean, is that, you know, sometimes I'm in an area assembly and I need to be put on suicide alert. It's so boring, you know. And but nonetheless, it is the work and the process of Alcoholics Anonymous to make sure that books will be there, coffee will be there, lights will be on, pamphlets will be there. And that 12th step in practice these principles in all my affairs has really given me some guidance in my life. Now, the good Lord has blessed me with quite a few young pigeons. And, you know, the thing that I have found out is that when I pray for help, God sends me people. And they usually ask just the question I need to hear. And the thing is that, you know what, our 10th tradition says we have no opinion on outside issues. That means mind your own business, by the way. Anyway, but what it got down to is that I got a lot of opinions on inside issues, you know, and I'm never hesitant to share those with people. And, you know, sometimes what I say, I need to hear the most, and I'm just not listening, you know, and so the thing has a full circle, is that what I found out is, and I'll wrap this up because I think God put me on crutches as a blessing to you, you know, so I wouldn't be up here too long. Only thing he'd do better for you was take my voice. Now, what I didn't know about for years in Alcoholics Anonymous was if I go through the steps, what I receive is a half measure. I don't receive the full blessing of Alcoholics Anonymous until I take another man through the steps. And for that, see, there have been times in my life where I thought, well, you know, I don't want to drink anymore. There's not too much reason to go to meeting. I don't need this. And I forgot. I'm there to make sure the same Alcoholics Anonymous is there for the next Alcoholic Anonymous that walks up the driveway, isn't sure, and looks to find some big fat guy to hide behind because for some reason his drinking has caused him to be placed in a room of Alcoholics Anonymous. And if I'm not there and I'm not listening, the message that man needs to hear, what I didn't realize is those things in my 4th step I swore I'd take to the grave, you know, I can share that with another man. And I can save that man's life and allow him to pass that message on to someone else. I don't realize that the thing that if I think I say it out loud, all you folks pull your chairs away from me, is the thing that can help another man to realize the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'd like to thank Randy and the committee. The gift basket, speaker's basket, was gorgeous. Not only do you guys feed us here, I could live off that gift basket. Well, I could probably go through it pretty quick. But, you know, nonetheless, it's a beautiful basket. And I'd really like to thank you folks for the privilege of being allowed. Because if life were fair, I wouldn't be let out and about. You guys have a great day. And I'm looking forward to KIP tonight and have a great conference. Thank you.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. If that shows up, the gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.